Maya had always been different. At 24 years old, she weighed over 300 pounds and had never been on a date, never been kissed, never felt wanted by anyone. She lived in a small, dirty trailer at the edge of town where the paint peeled off the walls and the roof leaked when it rained. Her mother had died 3 years ago, leaving her with Rick, her stepfather who smelled like cigarettes and cheap beer. Rick didn't work much. Instead, he spent his days on the couch watching TV and thinking of ways to make quick money. Maya had become his favorite way to earn a few dollars. "Get up, Maya," Rick would shout every morning. "Mrs. Johnson needs someone to clean her house. She'll pay $2 for the whole day." $2, that's what Maya's entire day was worth to these people. She would scrub floors until her knees hurt, wash dishes until her hands were raw, and carry heavy boxes until her back screamed in pain. All for $2 measly that Rick would take from her the moment she walked through the door. The worst part wasn't the hard work or the terrible pay. It was how people looked at her. They stared at her size, whispered behind her back, and treated her like she was invisible. At the grocery store, kids would point and giggle. Adults would move away from her in line like being overweight was something they could catch. Maya tried to make herself smaller, walking with her head down, wearing baggy clothes that hid her body. She spoke in whispers and apologized for everything, even when it wasn't her fault. When Rick yelled at her for eating too much food, she would go to bed hungry. When he told her she was worthless, she believed him. Her only escape was the small collection of old books she had found in a dumpster behind the library, romance novels with torn covers and missing pages. She would read them late at night by the light of her phone, imagining what it would feel like to have someone care about her, to be seen as beautiful, to matter to another human being. But every morning, reality would hit her like a slap in the face. She would look in the cracked mirror in her tiny bathroom and see everything wrong with her life reflected back. Her unwashed hair, her tired eyes, her body that took up too much space in a world that had no room for her. The trailer park where she lived was full of broken dreams and forgotten people. Old cars that didn't run anymore sat in front of homes that were falling apart. Dogs barked all night and sirens could be heard in the distance. Maya felt like she belonged here, among all the discarded things that nobody wanted. Rick had started bringing strangers to the house. Men who needed someone to clean their garage or organize their storage room. They would look at Maya like she was a piece of furniture, something useful but not worth noticing. "She's strong," Rick would tell them. "She can work all day and won't complain." And Maya didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. This trailer was the only home she had, and Rick was the only family left. Without him, she would be completely alone on the streets with nowhere to go and no money to her name. One particularly bad day, Maya had spent 12 hours cleaning out a basement that smelled like mold and dead mice. Her clothes were filthy. Her body ached, and she had eaten nothing but a stale piece of bread for breakfast. When she came home, Rick was waiting with his hand stretched out. "Give me the money," he demanded. "But I worked so hard today," Maya said quietly. "Can I keep just $1? I need to buy some soap." Rick's face turned red with anger. "You live in my house, eat my food, and use my electricity. You don't deserve to keep anything. You're lucky I let you stay here at all. Who else would want a fat, ugly girl like you?" Those words hit Maya harder than any physical blow could have. She handed over the 2 crumpled dollar bills and went to her room, which was really just a corner of the trailer separated by a thin curtain. She lay on her mattress on the floor and stared at the ceiling with tears running down her face. That night, she read one of her romance novels about a woman who thought she was worthless until someone showed her how valuable she really was. Maya closed the book and wondered if stories like that only happened to people who lived in books. Real life seemed much crueler than any story she had ever read. She looked out her small window at the desert that stretched beyond the trailer park. The vast emptiness reminded her of how she felt inside, like there was nothing there worth seeing, nothing worth saving. Maya had no idea that somewhere out in that same desert, someone was about to enter her life who would change everything. At 24 years old, Maya believed her story was already over before it had really begun. She thought she would spend the rest of her life in this trailer, working for pennies invisible to the world. She had no way of knowing that sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen to people who think they're beyond saving. Tomorrow would bring another day of the same routine. Wake up, get yelled at by Rick, work for almost nothing, come home exhausted, and go to bed feeling worthless. But Maya didn't know that tomorrow would actually be the first day of a completely different life. As she drifted off to sleep, Maya's last thought was a wish she had made 1,000 times before. She wished that somewhere in the world, there, was at least one person who might see something good in her. She had no idea that wish was about to come true in the most unexpected way possible. The next morning started like every other morning in Maya's life. Rick was already shouting at her before she was fully awake. "Get up. There's a man here who needs help with something. He's paying $5 for the day." $5. Maya couldn't remember the last time someone had offered that much for her work. She quickly got dressed in her usual baggy jeans and oversized t-shirt, both stained from yesterday's cleaning job. Outside the trailer, she saw a man leaning against a dusty pickup truck. He was tall and thin, with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. His clothes were simple but clean, cargo pants and a faded green shirt. What struck Maya most was how quietly he stood, like he was comfortable, with silence in a way most people weren't. "This is Maya," Rick said, pushing her forward. "She'll do whatever you need. Just bring her back by sunset and have my money ready." The stranger looked at Rick with an expression Maya couldn't quite read. It wasn't angry, but there was something hard in his eyes. Then he looked at Maya, and his face softened completely. "I'm David," he said in a voice that was gentle but confident. "I work as a photographer, taking pictures of wildlife in the desert. My regular assistant got sick, and I need someone to help carry equipment and spot animals. Would you be interested in that kind of work?" Maya was so surprised that someone had asked her what she wanted that she almost forgot to answer. "Yes, sir. I can carry heavy things." "Good. Let's go then." As they drove away from the trailer park, Maya pressed herself against the passenger door, trying to take up as little space as possible. She expected David to make small talk or ask personal questions, but he seemed content to drive in comfortable silence. The truck was clean but lived in, with camera equipment carefully packed in the back. After about 30 minutes, they stopped near a rocky area where the desert opened up into beautiful red and orange formations. Maya had lived near this desert her whole life but had never really looked at it. Through David's eyes, she began to see how stunning it actually was. "The light is perfect right now," David said, pulling cameras and tripods from the truck. "Animals are most active in the early morning before it gets too hot." He handed Maya a small backpack filled with camera lenses and water bottles. It was heavier than she expected, but not impossible to carry. As they walked into the desert, David moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged in this landscape. "There," he whispered, pointing to a cluster of rocks about 50 feet away. "Do you see the roadrunner?" Maya squinted and tried to look where he was pointing. At first, she saw nothing but rocks and desert plants. Then suddenly she spotted it, a bird with long legs and a distinctive crest, perfectly camouflaged against the stone. "I see it," she whispered back, surprised by her own excitement. David smiled, the first real smile anyone had given her in months. "You have good eyes. Most people can't spot wildlife on their first try." As the morning went on, Maya found herself genuinely enjoying the work. David taught her how to move quietly so they wouldn't scare animals away. He showed her how different creatures left different kinds of tracks in the sand. He explained how the desert ecosystem worked, with each animal and plant depending on the others for survival. "That lizard there," he said, pointing to a small creature sunning itself on a rock, "looks tiny and unimportant, but it eats insects that would otherwise destroy the plants. The plants provide shelter for birds. The birds spread seeds that grow into new plants. Everything has a purpose." Maya wondered if he was trying to tell her something about her own life, but she pushed the thought away. She was just a fat girl who cleaned houses for $2 a day. She didn't have a purpose in any ecosystem. Around noon, David pulled out a lunch he had packed. Instead of the usual stale bread or cheap snacks Maya was used to, He had made real sandwiches with fresh vegetables, turkey, and cheese. He handed her one without comment, along with a bottle of cold water. "Thank you," Maya said quietly. She couldn't remember the last time someone had shared good food with her. "You're earning it," David replied simply. "You've been a big help today." They sat in the shade of a large rock formation, eating in comfortable silence. Maya kept waiting for David to make jokes about her appearance or ask intrusive questions about her life. But he didn't. He treated her like a normal person, like someone whose company he actually enjoyed. "Why do you like taking pictures of animals?" Maya asked, surprising herself by starting a conversation. David thought for a moment before answering. "I used to be in the military, spent a lot of time in places where everything was about destruction and conflict. When I got out, I wanted to focus on life instead. Wild animals don't lie or pretend to be something they're not. They're just authentic." Maya understood exactly what he meant, even though she had never been in the military. She spent so much time around people who lied, who pretended, who said cruel things just to hurt others. The desert felt honest in comparison. As the day continued, Maya discovered she had a natural talent for spotting animals. She found a family of ground squirrels, pointed out a hawk circling overhead, and even noticed the tiny tracks of a desert mouse in the sand. Each time she made a discovery, David would nod approvingly and set up his camera to capture the shot. "You're really good at this," he told her as they packed up the equipment. "Better than most people I've worked with." Maya felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. Someone thought she was good at something. Someone valued her contribution. As they drove back to the trailer park, Maya dreaded returning to her reality. The day had felt like stepping into one of her romance novels, except instead of finding love, she had found something almost as precious: respect. "Same time tomorrow?" David asked as they pulled up to her trailer. Maya's heart jumped. "You want me to come back?" "Of course. We work well together." Rick came out to collect his money, but Maya noticed David's expression harden again as he handed over the bills. There was something protective in the way David looked at Rick, like he was sizing up a threat. "Take care of yourself, Maya," David said before driving away. As Maya watched his truck disappear into the desert, she realized something had shifted inside her. For one entire day, she had felt like a real person with value and skills. She had laughed, learned new things, and contributed something meaningful to someone else's work. That night, instead of reading one of her romance novels, Maya lay in bed thinking about roadrunners and desert ecosystems and the way David had smiled when she spotted her first wild animal. She thought about his words, that everything in the desert had a purpose. Maybe, just maybe, she had a purpose too. She just hadn't found it yet. Maya's second day in the desert was even better than the first. David had brought a second camera and taught her how to use it. Her hands shook at first as she held the expensive equipment, terrified she might drop it and owe more money than she could ever repay. "Relax," David said calmly. "Cameras are tools, not treasures. They're meant to be used." By the end of the week, Maya had taken her first real photograph, a picture of a desert fox drinking from a small water source hidden between rocks. When David developed the film and showed it to her, Maya couldn't believe she had created something so beautiful. "This is really good," David said, studying the image. "You have a natural eye for composition." Maya stared at the photograph in wonder. She had made this. Her brain, her hands, her decision about where to point the camera had created this moment of beauty. It was the first time in her life she had made something instead of just cleaning up other people's messes. As weeks passed, Maya found herself changing in ways she hadn't expected. The daily hiking in the desert was making her stronger. David always packed healthy lunches with fresh fruits, vegetables, and protein that gave her energy instead of making her feel sluggish. She wasn't trying to lose weight, but her clothes were starting to fit differently. More importantly, she was beginning to speak up. When David asked her opinion about which angle would make a better shot, Maya started sharing her ideas instead of just shrugging. When he explained different camera settings, she asked questions instead of pretending to understand. "Why do you make the aperture smaller for landscape shots?" she asked one day. "Because it keeps more of the image in focus," David explained, patiently. "Try it and see the difference." Maya experimented with the settings and immediately saw how the change affected her pictures. Learning felt amazing. She had forgotten what it was like to discover new things and actually understand them. One morning, about a month into their partnership, David's truck broke down on the way to their shooting location. They were stranded about 5 miles from the main road with no cell phone signal. "I know these mountains," David said, looking at his map. "But it'll be a long walk back to civilization." "Actually," Maya said quietly, then stopped herself. "What?" David asked. "Well, there's an old mining road that cuts through the hills about 2 miles from here. Someone I know used to drive that way when I was younger. It comes out right by the gas station on Highway 10. David looked at her with surprise and respect. "Can you find it?" Maya felt a flutter of pride. For once, she knew something useful that someone else didn't. "Yes, I think so." They packed the most essential camera equipment and started hiking. Maya led the way, remembering landmarks from childhood trips she had taken with her mother before Rick came into their lives. She had always been good with directions, but nobody had ever asked her to use that skill before. 2 hours later, they emerged exactly where Maya had promised they would. David looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "That was incredible navigation," he said. "How did you do that?" Maya felt herself blushing. "I just remember places well, I guess. I never thought it was important." "Important? Maya, that skill could save lives in the desert. Have you ever thought about becoming a guide?" The idea had never occurred to her. She was just Maya, the fat girl who cleaned houses. But looking at David's serious expression, she began to wonder what other abilities she might have that had been dismissed or ignored. That evening, as David dropped her off at the trailer park, Rick was waiting with a scowl on his face. "You're 20 minutes late," he snapped. "I don't appreciate people who can't keep their word." For the first time in her adult life, Maya felt a spark of anger instead of shame. She had spent the day using her skills to help someone, learning new things and solving problems. She didn't deserve to be spoken to like she was worthless. "We had car trouble," Maya said firmly, looking Rick directly in the eyes instead of staring at the ground. "David will be here tomorrow at the same time." Rick seemed surprised by her confident tone but said nothing more as David handed over the day's payment. As Maya walked toward the trailer, she heard David call her name. She turned around to see him rolling down his window. "Maya, you did great work today. Not just the navigation, everything. You should be proud of yourself." That night, Maya looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror and saw something different. Her face looked less tired. Her eyes seemed brighter. She was still overweight, still living in a trailer with someone who treated her badly, still struggling with money. But something fundamental had shifted. She was beginning to believe she might be worth something. The next few weeks brought new challenges and discoveries. David started teaching Maya about different types of photography. Not just wildlife, but landscapes, macro photography of desert plants, and even some portrait techniques. She learned about light and shadow, timing and patience, the way different weather conditions could completely change a photograph. "Photography is really about seeing," David explained as they watched the sunrise paint the desert rocks in shades of gold and red. "Most people look at things without really seeing them. They miss the beauty that's right in front of them." Maya understood he was talking about more than just taking pictures. She had spent so many years looking at herself without really seeing anything except her flaws. She had looked at her life and seen only problems instead of possibilities. One afternoon, Maya spotted a roadrunner family with 3 babies learning to hunt for insects. She positioned herself perfectly to capture the parent bird teaching its young, and the resulting photograph was spectacular. "This could win contests," David said, examining the image. "Have you ever thought about entering photography competitions?" "Me?" Maya laughed, but not in a bitter way. The idea seemed impossible, but not ridiculous. "I've only been taking pictures for 2 months. Some people study photography for years. and never develop the instincts you have naturally, David replied. Seriously? Don't underestimate yourself. Maya was beginning to realize that maybe she had been underestimating herself her entire life. Every day in the desert, she discovered new capabilities she didn't know she possessed. She could read animal behavior, predict weather changes, find her way through unmarked terrain, and capture moments of natural beauty that took David's breath away. But perhaps most importantly, she was learning to trust her own voice. When David asked for her opinion, she gave it. When she had ideas for better shots, she shared them. When she disagreed with his suggestions, she said so respectfully but confidently. Maya was becoming someone she had never imagined she could be. Someone with skills, opinions, and value. Someone who contributed to the world instead of just surviving in it. She still went home to Rick's criticism in the cramped trailer every night. She still struggled with self-doubt and years of conditioning that told her she was worthless. But now she had proof that those voices were wrong. Every beautiful photograph she took, every animal she spotted first, every successful navigation through difficult terrain was evidence that Maya had something important to offer the world. She was no longer the invisible girl who worked for $2 a day. She was becoming someone who mattered. 3 months of working with David had transformed Maya in ways she was only beginning to understand. She had lost nearly 40 pounds without trying, simply from hiking through the desert every day and eating proper meals. But more importantly, she had discovered talents she never knew existed. Her photography had improved so much that David suggested she apply for a part-time position with the local nature conservancy. They needed someone to document desert wildlife for their educational programs and research projects. I could never get a job like that, Maya protested when David first mentioned it. I don't have any formal education or experience. You have something better, David replied, showing her the portfolio of photographs she had taken over the past few months. You have natural talent and 3 months of professional experience. Plus, I'd be happy to provide a reference. Maya stared at her photographs spread across David's kitchen table, pictures of desert foxes, rare birds, stunning sunrises, and hidden water sources that sustained life in the harshest environment. She had created all of this beauty. The evidence was right in front of her. The next morning, instead of heading straight to the desert, David drove Maya to the Nature Conservancy office. Her heart pounded as they walked through the doors of the modern building with its displays of local wildlife and conservation information. You must be Maya, said a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. I'm Janet, the education director. David has told me wonderful things about your work. Maya showed Janet her portfolio, her hands shaking slightly as she pointed out different techniques she had learned and locations where she had captured particularly difficult shots. To her amazement, Janet seemed genuinely impressed. These are remarkable, Janet said, studying a photograph Maya had taken of a desert owl family. Especially this one. Desert owls are incredibly difficult to photograph because they're so well camouflaged. How did you spot them? I noticed the parent birds. Eyes first, Maya explained, her confidence growing as she talked about something she understood. Then I waited for about 2 hours until the babies moved. They only came out for a few minutes, but I was ready. Janet smiled. Patience and observation skills like that can't be taught. They're gifts. Would you be interested in starting with us part-time? We need someone to photograph wildlife for our new educational program about desert ecosystems. Maya felt like she might faint. A real job, with a real organization that valued her skills. Yes, she managed to say. Yes, I would love that. The job paid $15 an hour for 20 hours a week, more money than Maya had ever earned in her life. Enough to start thinking about independence from Rick and the trailer park. When David drove her home that evening, Maya felt like she was floating. She had a real job with people who respected her work. She had proven to herself that she could succeed at something meaningful, but her good mood crashed the moment she walked into the trailer. Rick was drunk and angry, which usually meant trouble for Maya. Where have you been? He slurred. You're supposed to be back by 6 o'clock. I had a job interview, Maya said carefully. She decided not to mention that she had gotten the job. Rick in this mood was unpredictable. A job interview? Rick laughed harshly, Who would want to hire you? You're nothing but a fat, ugly girl who's only good for cleaning up other people's messes. 6 months ago, those words would have destroyed Maya. They would have confirmed everything she believed about herself and sent her to bed in tears. But now, with a portfolio of beautiful photographs and a job offer fresh in her mind, Rick's cruelty bounced off her like rocks hitting a mountain. "I got the job," Maya said quietly but firmly. Rick's expression changed from amusement to anger. "What job?" "Working for the Nature Conservancy, taking photographs and helping with their education programs." "That's ridiculous," Rick snapped. "You don't know anything about photography or education. You're just a cleaner." "Actually, I've been learning photography for 3 months, Maya," said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm good at it, good enough that they want to hire me." Rick stood up, swaying slightly. Maya had seen this pattern before. When he felt like he was losing control, he got aggressive. "You're not taking any fancy job," he said menacingly. "You work for me. You live in my house and you do what I tell you to do. That photographer friend of yours has filled your head with stupid ideas, but this is reality." For the first time in her adult life, Maya stood her ground. "This trailer doesn't belong to you, Rick. It belonged to my mother, and she left it to me. I've been letting you live here, not the other way around." Rick's face turned red. "You ungrateful little pig. After everything I've done for you." "What have you done for me?" Maya asked, her voice rising. "You've taken every dollar I've earned. You've called me names and made me feel worthless. You've treated me like a slave instead of a person." "Because that's all you are," Rick shouted. "You're nothing. Nobody will ever want you or love you, or care what happens to you." Maya felt tears threatening, but they weren't tears of hurt, they were tears of anger. She thought about David's respect for her opinions, Janet's excitement about her photographs, and all the animals she had learned to understand and capture on film. "You're wrong," Maya said firmly. "I am somebody. I have skills and talents and people who value my work. I matter." Rick raised his hand as if to hit her, but Maya didn't flinch. She had spent 3 months hiking through dangerous desert terrain, learning to be brave in the face of uncertainty. She was no longer the scared girl who accepted abuse because she thought she deserved it. "If you touch me, I'll call the police," Maya said calmly. "And then I'll ask you to leave my trailer." Rick seemed shocked by her transformation. The cowering, apologetic Maya he had bullied for years was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth. "You can't kick me out," he said, but his voice had lost its threatening edge. "Actually, I can," Maya replied. "And I will, if you don't. Start treating me with respect." That night, Maya lay in bed making plans. She would start her new job next week. She would save money from her regular photography work with David and her new position at the Conservancy. In a few months, she would have enough to fix up the trailer properly, or even move somewhere better. More importantly, she had discovered something that changed everything. She didn't need anyone else to validate her worth. She had proven to herself that she was capable, talented, and valuable. Rick's opinions couldn't touch that truth anymore. Maya looked through her portfolio of photographs one more time before going to sleep. Each image represented a moment when she had seen beauty in the world and had the skill to capture it. Each photograph was proof that she had something important to contribute. Tomorrow, she would start her new life as a professional photographer. She would work with people who respected her abilities and valued her contributions. She would continue, learning, growing, and discovering just how much she was capable of achieving. Maya smiled as she drifted off to sleep. For the first time in her life, she was excited about the future. She had found her place in the world, and nobody could take that away from her. The scared, invisible girl who had worked for $2 a day was gone forever. In her place was a woman who knew exactly how much she was worth. 2 years had passed since Maya first stepped into the desert with David, and her life was completely unrecognizable. She now worked full-time for the Nature Conservancy, leading photography workshops and educational programs. Her photographs had been featured in national wildlife magazines, and she had won several prestigious awards for conservation photography. But Maya's greatest accomplishment wasn't professional recognition, it was the community center she had helped establish. In her old neighborhood, the Desert Dreams photography program provided free classes for young people from low-income families, teaching them both photography skills and confidence. Remember, the camera sees what you choose to show it, Maya told a group of 12. Teenagers gathered around her in the renovated trailer that now served as their classroom. When you look through that viewfinder, you have the power to capture beauty that other people might miss. Among her students was Alex, a 15-year-old boy who reminded Maya of herself at that age. Overweight, shy, and convinced he had nothing valuable to offer the world. When Alex first joined the program 6 months ago, he barely spoke above a whisper and apologized for everything he said. "Miss Maya," Alex said, raising his hand tentatively. "I got that shot of the hawk you suggested, but I don't think it's very good." Maya looked at Alex's photograph on the camera's display screen and felt her breath catch. The image showed a red-tailed hawk in perfect focus, wings spread against a dramatic desert sky. The composition was flawless, and the timing had captured the exact moment when the bird's fierce beauty was most apparent. "Alex, this is incredible," Maya said genuinely. "Look at how you position the horizon line. See how the hawk's wing extends into the rule of thirds? This is professional quality work." Alex's face lit up with the same wonder Maya remembered feeling when David first praised her photography. That moment of realizing you have created something beautiful, something that matters, never gets old. "Really?" Alex asked. "You think it's good enough to enter in the youth competition?" "I think it's good enough to win the youth competition," Maya replied, and meant it. After class, Maya walked through her old trailer park, which looked very different now. The community center had sparked improvements throughout the neighborhood. Several families had painted their homes, planted small gardens, and created a sense of pride in their surroundings. Maya's own life had changed just as dramatically. She lived in a small but comfortable house on the edge of town, with her own darkroom for developing film and walls covered with her favorite photographs. She had lost over 100 pounds through her active lifestyle, but more importantly, she had gained immeasurable confidence and purpose. David still worked with her regularly, and their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper. They had discovered they shared not just a love of photography, but similar values about conservation, education, and helping people discover their potential. "How was class today?" David asked as Maya joined him for dinner at their favorite restaurant. A small place that served fresh, healthy food and displayed local artists' work on the walls. "Amazing as always," Maya said, showing him Alex's hawk photograph on her phone. "Look what Alex captured today." David studied the image and whistled softly. "That's remarkable. He's really developing an eye for wildlife photography. He reminds me of myself when we first started working together," Maya said. "So sure he had nothing special to offer, but so talented once someone believed in him." David smiled at her across the table. "You've helped more young people discover their talents than I could count. The program you created is changing lives." Maya thought about all the teenagers who had come through the Desert Dreams program over the past year. Kids who had never left their neighborhoods were now hiking through wilderness areas, learning to see beauty in nature and in themselves. Several had received college scholarships based on their photography portfolios. But the program was about more than just photography. It was about showing young people that they had value, that their perspectives mattered, that they could create something meaningful with their lives. Maya taught them the same lesson the desert had taught her, that everything has a purpose, even things that seem small or unimportant. "I got some interesting news today," Maya said, pulling out a letter she had received that morning. "The National Geographic Society wants to feature our program in their education magazine. They want to do a full article about using photography to help at-risk youth build confidence." David's eyes widened. "Maya, that's incredible. National recognition could help you expand the program to other communities." Maya nodded, still hardly believing it herself. "The reporter wants to interview some of my students and photograph our classes in action. Alex specifically asked if he could be included in the article." "Of course he did," David laughed. "That kid worships you. You've shown him possibilities he never knew existed." That evening, Maya walked through the desert area where she and David had taken their first photographs together. The landscape looked the same, but Maya saw it completely differently now. Instead of an empty, harsh environment, She saw a complex ecosystem full of life and beauty. She thought about Rick, who had moved out of the trailer park a year ago when Maya made it clear his behavior was no longer acceptable. He had never apologized for the years of emotional abuse, but Maya no longer needed his apology. She had healed from his damage by discovering her own strength. Maya pulled out her phone and looked through some of her favorite photographs from the past 2 years. Images of desert wildlife, stunning landscapes, and her students learning to see the world through new eyes. Each photograph represented a moment of joy, discovery, or accomplishment. But her most treasured pictures weren't landscapes or wildlife. They were the photographs she had taken of her students' faces when they captured their first perfect shot. The moment when a young person realizes they have created something beautiful is the most magnificent thing Maya had ever learned to photograph. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Alex. "Miss Maya, I submitted my hawk photo to that competition you told me about. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Maya smiled and typed back, "You did all the hard work, Alex. I just helped you see what was already there." As she watched the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors, Maya reflected on how much her life had changed. She had gone from being a girl who felt worthless and invisible to a woman who helped other people discover their own value. She had transformed from someone who lived for $2 a day to someone who measured her wealth in the lives she had helped improve. The scared, lonely girl who had once lived in a trailer, convinced she had nothing to offer the world, was gone forever. In her place was a confident woman who knew that everyone has something beautiful to contribute. Sometimes they just need someone to help them see it. Maya had found her purpose, and it was more fulfilling than any romance novel she had ever read. She was living proof that the most incredible transformations happen when someone believes in you, but the most lasting changes happen when you finally learn to believe in yourself. As she walked home through the desert, she now knew better than any other place on earth. Maya felt grateful for every difficult experience that had led her to this moment. Even Rick's cruelty had served a purpose. It had taught her to recognize her own strength. Maya's story wasn't about being saved by someone else. It was about discovering that she had always had the power to save herself. She just needed the right person to help her see it, and the right environment to let her talents flourish. Tomorrow she would teach another class, help another group of young people discover their capabilities, and continue building the legacy she was most proud of, proving that every person has immeasurable worth, no matter where they start in life.